Hi, my name is Lexi, and in this video I will be discussing women's sports in the media, an issue which has been a large topic of discussion and research for many years. The fact is, women's sports are highly underrepresented in both print and broadcast media compared to their male counterparts. But before I talk about women's sports in the world today, I must discuss the history and background of this issue, dating back to before the 1970s. At that point in time, about 1 in 27 girls played sports. Part of the reason for this number was the lack of opportunities for women to participate in. There simply weren't many teams for women to join. Another reason for the low participation in sports by women was the judgment that the athletes would receive for playing sports instead of following the societal expectation that a woman's place should be in the home. This all changed in 1972 when Congress passed the Title IX bill, mandating equal federal funding opportunities for male and female students, which included sports. The hope of this bill was to promote gender equality at the educational level. The passing of this legislation led to huge improvements in women's sports, with a significant increase in participation to 2 in 5 girls playing a wide range of sports. Before Title IX, the only sports that women were allowed to participate in were non-competitive and ruleless, focusing on physical activity only. Since the passing of Title IX, women's sports have become more formal and competitive. Title IX is an act that applies equality to educational programs, and here on this slide shows exactly how it applies to just athletics. The highlighted region shows that one of the benefits that is supposed to be provided by this legislation is equal treatment of female and male student athletes with regards to publicity and promotions. However, in an interview that I conducted with the intern under the Director of Basketball Operations at the University of Maryland, I learned that the marketing department operates under different budgets for men's and women's sports, with men's sports spending significantly more money on promotions. As a result of this, campus and fans are able to get behind men's sports more than women's sports. Coverage of women's sports did not explode at the same rate that the participation of women in sports did. Women constitute about 40% of the athletes in the world. Since the participation of women in sports has increased, you would also think that media coverage would have increased as well. Unfortunately, that is not the case, as women receive only 2 to 4% of all television media coverage, as shown here in the graph on the right. The logos on the left are just a few of the largest sports broadcasting brands and companies in the country. On ESPN SportsCenter alone, stories about women's sports average 77 seconds, which is nearly 50% shorter than men's sports stories. In addition to that, 96.4% of the information scrolling in the ticker along the bottom of the screen is dedicated to men's sports, according to the Women's Sports Foundation. When asked about the experiences of the Maryland women's basketball team with the media, my interviewee said that some players and the head coach will occasionally get interviewed for print articles rather than broadcasted media. I was also able to retrieve interviews from 2 players on the University of Maryland women's basketball team who chose to remain anonymous to speak on this subject of women's sports in the media. One player told me that for the most part, the reporters chosen to cover their team seem uninterested, asking mediocre and simple questions that aren't very meaningful. This is a common trend in women's sports where the reporters don't necessarily care to get the full story and acknowledge all the achievements made by the athletes. In the very rare occasions that women are featured and recognized in the media, the athletes are discussed on the basis of their physical activity instead of their athletic ability. For example, here we have 2 magazine covers from ESPN and Sports Illustrated. Both of them depict the athletes as very feminine and sexual. This is compared to these men's sports covers where the players are shown in their full uniforms with strong, competitive looks on their faces. Now for a quick recap on everything I've covered so far. We still see an issue between publicity and promotion of women's sports and men's sports, even though the Title IX bill was passed over 45 years ago. Increased participation does not equal increased media attention. The division of broadcasted media coverage significantly favors men's sports, as women only receive less than 5%. And finally, the media paints a strong masculine image of men's athletes and girly feminine image of female athletes. With all these issues still prevalent, I've generated ideas to help solve them. Keep in mind that this is something that will take years and efforts from all parties to overcome. First, we need to generate public interest in women's sports. Now, I know what you're thinking. How are you supposed to do that without the media? The thing is, the media doesn't necessarily feature women's sports because they think there is no interest. From the interviews that I conducted, I was told that getting younger generations of athletes is key to having lifelong fans. Once there is more interest, the media will see that covering women's sports is worth their time and money. A second solution is to have female athletes ask for more attention. With all the hard work and dedication that they put into their craft, they should want people to know about it and acknowledge their achievements. And my last solution is simple: dedicate more time to women's sports in the media. It doesn't need to be exactly 50-50 between men's and women's sports just yet, but every little bit towards equality helps. Thank you for watching!